Hell hath no fury like a muscle-bound powerhouse with guns, a short temper, and a hatred of demons. But it'll try. Oh, it'll try. We're talking about Hellbound. Fresh out the oven. If that starting sentence reminded you of something else about a muscle-bound guy with guns and a short temper, that's probably for a reason. Hellbound is a retro shooter developed by Cybot Studios and is part of the recent trend of first-person shooters made by smaller teams that attempt to bring back older ideas of what a FPS really was. Just by looking at the game, it's easy to tell that the Doom series heavily inspired it. From the demons to the lava, and even the little portrait of the guy at the bottom of the screen. They're all reminiscent of it. But the game really pulls from a variety of 90s and early 2000s FPS sources. You got your semi-realistic but yet obviously fantastical spaces like the Build Engine games, your rocket jumping and power-ups like Quake, and even some large open level design similar to Serious Sam. There really is a good variety of ideas thrown into the mix here from all over the place, but it's difficult to get away from the Doom comparison, especially since the game's art design gives off a Doom 2016 vibe, but obviously on a smaller budget. That budget was thanks to a successful Kickstarter campaign in 2018, raising around $41,000. Unlike most retro shooters that use older visual styles like sprites and low-poly 3D, Hellbound wanted to go in a different direction, for better or for worse. There's a reason why most indie teams go the route of older graphics, as the more modern a game's visuals are, generally means the more money that's going to be spent on it. While I don't know how much of the budget was used specifically for the visuals, I can say that it looks like it could have used just a tad bit more. For the most part, the game looks fine, but everything lacks a good amount of polish to really get that crisp look id was able to with Doom 2016. Then again, Doom 2016 most likely had a much deeper pool of cash to work with. It only really starts becoming a problem on higher graphical settings, as the game can start to stutter and stop at random intervals, even when the surroundings are fairly simple. There are thankfully a good amount of video settings to mess around with, and I was eventually able to figure something out that I could live with. I do feel sorry for anyone who tries to play this thing on the lowest settings, though. Ugh. Aside from technical stuff, the overall art design has some of its own problems. There's a lot of rock, fire, and lava, and little else to change things up from an assault of grays and browns. There's not really much variety here from level to level, but the game is called Hellbound, and it does nail the hellscape look really well. Character design is pretty straightforward, but creative enough to be distinct for everything but these thin fireball-throwing guys. Either due to their color scheme or how thin and gaunt their model is, they tend to blend into the environment at a distance. Their fireballs are rather easy to dodge and give a good indication of where they're coming from, but there was more than once I just didn't notice one of these dudes before they got a few attacks off. Comparing graphical quality from a small indie team to a large developer, like between Hellbound and Doom 2016, may not be considered fair, but I feel like the art direction is a different story, and that Hellbound could have used another pass just to make sure everything not only looked good, but also visually functioned as well as it could. Visuals are really the first thing that's going to catch your attention with this game, as its plot, like most old-school first-person shooters, is basically non-existent. Players take on the role of Hellgore, a deep-voiced and super-macho humanoid alien brought back to life thanks to cloning technology. Humans manage to discover his home planet through teleportation, but they're quickly met with disaster. Turns out the entire planet had already been taken over by demons. Demons humanity didn't stand a chance against. The most they were able to do was find Hellgore's skull, clone him a new body, somehow complete with his memories, then send him back and hope he could somehow stop the demons. This story is really only given in short paragraphs as each level loads in and sets a bit of a somber tone that Helgor himself tends to go against.
Fucking keys. Can't I just blow the door up?
He's always got something to say at the start of a level, and it comes off more like something Duke Nukem would say, more than matching the rest of the game's writing. The writing tries to be dark, mysterious, and serious to really pull you into the game and set the stakes rather high. But to Helgor and his wisecracks, it just seems like an average Tuesday.
Dead demons make for great compost.
Annoyingly enough, every time players load in a save in a level, either by dying or loading up a quick save, Helgor repeats his opening lines for that level. And if you end up dying a lot, then you get to hear it over and over and over. Hellbound offers multiple difficulty settings, with the highest one needing to be unlocked, and thankfully it does, since it's surprising just how little damage you can take when cranking things up. All ranged attacks are projectile-based, meaning that they can be dodged if you see them in time, and level design is rather open, giving players a lot of space to move around in. Dismembering enemies is not only oddly satisfying, but also has them drop some extra health pickups if you happen to need it, and anything carrying a weapon drops it when they die, giving you a bit more ammo. There's also a decent amount of stuff just lying around, from armor to power-ups, with plenty of secrets to uncover if you can find them, and if they end up being worth being found. For some reason, level design in this game tends to have a lot of explorable areas and lava pits, and even though they are accessible, there's rarely anything there to get. Secrets are usually hidden behind push walls or in hard-to-reach places, leaving these lava islands barren, and makes me wonder why they exist at all. I'm already risking taking damage just getting out here, and as the difficulty goes up, lava damage becomes more and more of a problem. There being absolutely nothing to find while out here island hopping just feels like a missed opportunity. After a while, I found myself having to play on normal opposed to the old-school difficulty just to get past the annoyance of constantly dying. Constantly dying is something I usually just put up with when playing shooters considered old-school. But Hellbound's extended loading times makes that a very annoying process. Every time the game loads, be it starting a level or going back to a quick save, you gotta sit through a surprisingly long loading screen, which just makes having to do it a pain in the butt. I don't mind difficulty in games, but I do mind long loading screens. On top of this, what doesn't help is that while the game focuses on both moving and shooting, the style of FPS I personally really enjoy, weapons are kind of dull to use. There's only a small handful of them, with a single-shot rifle thing, a 3-barreled shotgun, a chain gun, and a rocket launcher, along with two melee options. When the game starts, Helgor only has a rifle and his massive fists to dismember enemies with, but it's not long until he gets his hand on a spiked club. This thing does way more damage than just punching, and even has a secondary attack that hits even harder, making using his bare hands redundant. The single-shot rifle itself is also probably the worst and least interesting weapon in the entire game. Hellbound has a real problem when it comes to unsatisfying weaponry. There's little feedback when firing something, so weapons like the rifle and chain gun aren't all that impactful to use. They don't sound particularly powerful, their animations are rather basic, and enemies don't react much to getting shot. Then again, enemies aren't all that brilliant to begin with, and mostly just run at you till they die. There are variations of them that use every weapon you can use, yes, even that one you're thinking of right now. Yeah, they can use that. And while they sometimes will change their behaviors, such as ones with rifles firing in batches of 3 shots, they don't really require much strategy. The good thing about them constantly running at you is that it puts them directly within shotgun range. Unlike other weapons, the tri-barrel shotgun can be very, very satisfying. Every weapon has some kind of secondary action for it, and the shotgun gets to fire all 3 barrels at once. Doing so can dismember just about anything with some very chunky sound effects. This is only made better if you can find yourself a hell damage power-up and really get the carnage started. Hellgore can hold a good amount of ammo for it as well, which quickly made it my go-to weapon for anything besides long-range targets. The only reason not to use it is if you find yourself low on ammo, but that rarely happened to me, and I only really ever used other weapons for the sake of variety. Not even the rocket launcher was able to match up to this thing. It does make a nice little mess out of small groups of baddies, as well as letting players rocket jump to reach secret areas easier, but it has a very limited ammo pool and a basically useless secondary fire. For some reason, this thing doubles as a grenade launcher, which wouldn't be so bad if not for the fact that the grenades do not detonate on impact. They will literally just bounce off enemies and roll around on the floor. Since enemies are always moving, chasing you, it's rare for them to even be close to a grenade when it explodes, making grenades nothing but a waste of potential. From my entire experience with the game, that's what Hellbound feels like in general. Just a waste of potential. All but one weapon is lackluster. Level design is mostly open and somewhat flat, making for rather repetitive areas, and enemies don't do much to make players think about how they're playing the game. It was only near the end when a type of flying, shooting, teleporting thing started showing up to spice up encounters, but by that time it was too little too late. There is a boss all the way at the end, which requires a little bit of strategy to deal with due to its multiple attacks, but you're also constantly being swarmed by normal troops while fighting it, making the fight more about dealing with them and getting some shots off on the boss as opposed to anything else. While the game tries to add some spiciness with power-ups from time to time, such as Hell Damage for more damage, Hell Speed for more speed, and Hell Skin for more armor, they are few and far between and honestly don't do enough on their own. Plus, they just add to the incredibly uncreative naming scheme the entire project has going for it. I mean, the main character is named Hellgore, the power-ups are Hell Damage, Hell Speed, and Hell Skin, and the overall game is called Hellbound. That's a lot of hell for a game that doesn't actually involve hell at all. The game takes place on another planet that just happens to resemble a version of hell, and it's just as likely that the so-called demons are another faction of aliens opposed to anything demonic. But I digress. Hellbound is a confused game that's able to be close to capturing the 90s FPS feel it wants, but just isn't quite there. It's also very short and only really started getting interesting for me towards the end. So-called old-school shooters were usually broken up into multiple episodes that each had some kind of connecting theme, and this game really feels like it's just the first episode of a larger title. It even ends on a bit of a cliffhanger after its singular boss fight, giving the impression that the devs have more in mind for what they want to do with the title in the future, or even just what they wanted to do with this game in particular. I don't want to say that it's a bad game, because it's really not. I've played some really bad shooters in my day, and Hellbound circle strafes around them like crazy, but its main problem is that it's just kind of middling and dull, which is one of the worst things you can say about a game, to be honest. If it's bad, you can at least laugh at how bad it is, and if it's good, well, you know, it's good. If it's just in the middle, it's kind of not really going to do a whole heck of a lot for anyone. It wants to be an old-school shooter, but can't decide if it wants to take the Doom or Build Engine route, or do a serious Sam-type thing with tons of enemies all over the place all the time. There is a lot of potential here, and I'd love to see Cybot Studios take another crack at the concept, either with expansions or possibly even a second game. Second chances, however, aren't always guaranteed, and Hellbound doesn't do a ton to hold its own. That's all for now. Please let me know what you think of the game or this video in the comments section. I'm MegapiemanPHD, and I'll talk to you guys later. Want to see more of my stuff? Click on the video on the left for Bridge Constructor The Walking Dead, a game that mixes zombies with bridge building mechanics. Or click on the right for Headbangers in Holiday Hell, a mix of Zombies Ate My Neighbor's Nuclear Throne, Metal, and Christmas.